But you get just to the teachings of Christ, I can't find any faults in it.
Joe Rogan has clearly been on a spiritual journey. He said in a recent interview that he used to be very cynical about religion, but now he goes to church. He even seems to be finding the teachings of Jesus extremely compelling. Now, I think this is great, of course, but what's next? This is my advice for Joe Rogan and anyone who would find themselves in a similar spot as him. Hey, if you like this content, please subscribe. I really appreciate all the support. Okay, here's the clip with a bit more context.
One of the things that I always try to point out to people, they go, why do you go to church? Because when I was younger, I was very cynical about religion. One of the things that I always say is, if there was a pill that could make you as nice as the people that I go to church with, everybody would be on it. They're the kindest people you're ever going to come across.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think the people that are cynical about that, because they don't want to believe in fairy tales, or they don't want to be stupid, they don't want to get duped by, there's a foundation to that. If you just forget about some of the stuff that's in the Bible that, it gets weird when you get old. Like, you go back into the old stuff, because, for sure, human beings had some sort of an influence on what was written down and what wasn't written down. But you get just to the teachings of Christ, I can't find any faults in it. It's all about being kind. It's all about this idea that we're all in this together and that you're supposed to lift each other up and look after each other. There's no faults in it.
Now, I actually do remember Joe Rogan being pretty cynical towards religion and Christianity in particular, the Bible in particular. Not that long ago, he was raising problems and pretty dismissive about it in a number of his interviews.
If you think that the only way for a person to have ethics or an understanding of each other or compassion for each other is to rely on ancient myths that are easily scientifically disproven, well, that's what Christianity is.
No, I didn't say that. I
Well,
said
that's
that
what the Bible is.
Now, I don't think Joe Rogan is there yet, but he's definitely on a journey. Even in that video clip, he says that, right, the old stuff, he's kind of forget about that, almost as if he's got some issues with perhaps parts of the Old Testament. And I can understand that. That's fair enough. There's a lot there that one has to come to grips with. But he says, right, let's just focus on Jesus. Let's just focus on Christ. And I think that's exactly right. I would suggest to anyone who's pursuing Christianity, start with the life and teaching of Jesus first. Joe Rogan says that he can't find any faults with the teachings of Jesus, and I agree. I think the teachings of Jesus are unassailable. I get the sense that he's intrigued of what this looks like to live this out. Again, that kind of connects the niceness and the kindness of the people at his church. Of course, this is not everyone's experience at church, unfortunately. They might find a very ugly and arrogant version of Christianity that would say to a seeker like Joe Rogan, right, you're not welcome here. But I don't think that's a church that's living out the teachings of Jesus. But in any case, Joe Rogan is on the journey and he finds Jesus' teaching unassailable. And I agree. In fact, in my own personal experience, I've never had someone take issue with the teachings of Jesus. Now, I looked it up to see if I could find someone, and of course, there are some websites out there, some videos out there where people are critiquing Jesus, but it's not very impressive. They took issue with the fact that he's telling people to, dismember themselves, to gouge out their eyes, right? But of course, Jesus is using hyperbole there. He's exaggerating for effect and also taking a very strong stand against sin. So if your eye causes you to sin, he says to gouge it out. If your hand causes you to sin, he says to cut it off. Does he mean that literally? No, of course not. I saw someone else taking issue with the fact that he overturned the tables in the temple. Like, how rude of him to do that. But again, he's confronting religious corruption. These guys were using religion to make a buck. When you look at Jesus' teaching in a fair-minded way, I think you'll agree that it's just unassailable. Jesus often flipped the script on conventional wisdom. He calls us to love and serve others, right? Which in the ancient world would not be as common as you would hear it today, perhaps. right? He's calling us to love and serve others, and especially the disenfranchised, and even our enemies. It has this very clear virtue ethic or character-based ethic over and above a kind of mere duty fulfillment. We are called to be certain kinds of people, especially in our inner lives, even if what's on the outside, is at times kind of messy. Your status, your net worth, your influence, your platform, those all take a second seat for Jesus to the condition of your heart. I think that Jesus struck the balance beautifully between love and acceptance and forgiveness even, right, on one side, and seriousness about sin and morality and doing the right thing on the other. He just balanced that perfectly, both in his teaching as well as the way in which he lived his life. He wasn't afraid to call out sin, but for those that were humble in heart, right, it was love, acceptance, and forgiveness. I think that Jesus' teaching is some of the most profound bits of moral teaching, like in the history of the world. Just spend a little time on the Sermon on the Mount, on some of his parables, right? The parable of the lost son or the parable of the good shepherd. You can just look these up. You can Google these. They're easy to find. And they are so profound. You can just get lost in them. You can just begin thinking about how profound they are, and you won't be able to exhaust them. Now, in the video, Joe Rogan also emphasizes the focus of Christianity on forgiveness, and he sees that as a really attractive part of Christianity as well. And again, I agree that it's a beautiful aspect of Christianity that we are to forgive others or even to forgive our enemies. But there's a why to this, and this gets to my suggestion for what someone should do when they find themselves sort of intrigued by Jesus and his teaching, and they come to see him as this great moral teacher. Here's the thing, he's not merely a good moral teacher. In fact, I think there's a significant tension here. Interlaced with his moral teaching are these radical statements about himself and about what his mission on earth was. And I think you can't take his moral teaching and just leave off all of these radical claims about himself and his mission. Jesus, I think, clearly makes himself out to be God. There's a number of times throughout the Gospels where his Jewish audience pick up rocks ready to stone him, right, ready to execute him for blasphemy, for making himself out to be God. He even claims to forgive sins, which is only something from a Jewish perspective God can do. There are also these radical statements about his mission, right? He's there, of course, to teach, to be a rabbi, to start a movement of sorts, right? But he's ultimately there to die on a cross for sins. C.S. Lewis talks about this in a very famous passage out of Mere Christianity, where he's confronting the idea that Jesus is merely a good moral teacher. C.S. Lewis says, "That is one thing we must not say. A man who is merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on the level with the man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to." This gives us C.S. Lewis's famous trilemma, where given the teachings of Jesus, now you have to accept this as reliable and accurate teachings of Jesus. It can't be mere legend that's written in later. Okay, but once you've accepted that, Lewis's point is you can't call him a mere good moral teacher. Here are your available options. He's either a liar, right? Where he's lying about being God and forgiving sins and that he's here to die for the sins of the world and so on. So he's either a liar or he's crazy. He's a lunatic, right? On the level of a poached egg, as Lewis says. I don't know what kind of level of madness that would be, but it sounds pretty bad, right? He's a lunatic, but if he's not those two things and it's not a legend, then we should confess him as Lord. So my suggestion for Joe Rogan is to move beyond seeing him as a mere moral teacher and really consider the other things he has to say. I mean, that is really the fundamental question that we all have to confront is what do we say about Jesus? And here's the thing, his moral teaching takes on a whole new significance were we to take Jesus at his word and believe that he is who he claimed to be. It provides the why. Why should we love our enemies? Well, Christ loved his enemies, right? And we are surrendered to him. I'm honestly convinced that the way to flourish in life is to aim at and surrender our lives to Christ in every way, in every sense. You can probably follow his teachings and it'll make your life better in some ways. But if Jesus' claims are right, then he's the ultimate thing. He's the thing at which we aim. And it's through that surrender, right? The last becomes first. Through giving up our life, we find our life. So for those like Joe Rogan who thinks that Jesus is a good moral teacher, don't stop. Consider the whole picture. We need the why of these moral teachings. And I would suggest considering who Jesus himself claims to be. If he is who he claimed to be, then I think that Lewis is right, that our only option is to fall at his feet and call him Lord and God.
Christianity in particular is the most fascinating to me because there's this one person that everybody agrees existed that somehow or another had the best plan for how human beings should interact with each other and behave, and was the best example of it, and even died in a non-violent way. Like, didn't even protest, died on the cross, supposedly for our sins. Like, it's a fascinating story. What does it represent, though? That's the real thing. What was that? Like, what happened? Who was Jesus Christ if it was a human being? What was that?